Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Talib's remarks about the Holocaust draw criticism, I would say unfairly. Sagar may disagree. Sweden reopens its rape case against Julian Assange, and the Biden-Ukraine story. What the heck is going on there?
Well, so Team Rising is here to drop some knowledge. Roger Fisk worked for the Obama administration, previously served as senior aide for communication and policy for Senator John Kerry. Tony Shaffer is a Trump 2020 Advisory Board member and a military veteran. He has played key roles in multiple interagency operations conducted by NSA, CIA, and FBI. Welcome to you both.
Good morning. Heavy hitters here.
So what is going on with the former vice president and his relationship with Ukraine, Tony? Is it concerning for the former vice president and his son to obviously be engaged in some sort of business dealings and possibly using political influence in order to make sure that his son is making more money?
Well, that's the obvious question that has to be asked and answered is, what does that influence have to do with political and financial gain? Now, what's most interesting here is that there's a video of Joe Biden bragging to the world how he then was in Ukraine and influenced the internal machinations of their justice system. I mean, he brags about this. This is online. This is not me making this up or theorizing about it. And in this video, he says, I didn't like the prosecutor. He didn't say why I didn't like him, and I'll get to that in a second. But he talks about the fact that he threatened to hold back $1 billion to Ukraine over this. And the underlying issue is he was trying to get a prosecutor fired who's about to investigate his son.
Right.
Why would he do that? Because there was financial issues at stake. Right. It's a big issue.
Well, Roger, is this an improper use of diplomatic power? I mean, President Obama made Biden the Ukraine point man, and if he's using his influence to affect his son's business dealings, that has to be concerning to you.
Well, yeah, different than folks on the other side of the aisle. I'm not allergic to people looking into this. I'm not going to come and just say that by virtue of him being the former vice president's son or something that everyone should leave this alone. Shorkin was the name of the prosecutor that was fired. Shorkin's staff was found to have caches of diamonds and cash in their closets. There was lots of problems there. And it wasn't just in the eyes of the United States government.
That's right.
The IMF was preparing to pull out of a program there. And so there was an international move to try to get them to clean up their act. And part of that was getting rid of Shorkin. Now, if Hunter Biden or anyone else's kid or niece or nephew or anything else, I have no problem with legitimate inquiries into that. So I'm not going to come before you and just be kind of a reflexive kind of protective kind of posture, because I think wrongdoing should be looked into if that is in fact the case. What I think is clear is that this is a very convenient narrative to try to inflate and give life to, and you can see just by virtue of the outlets that are even covering it, that they're trying to prop this up as some counter narrative to what the president and his family have been up to for quite some time.
Well, I mean, Tony, just on the politics of this, and I agree with Roger, right? Like, Joe Biden's been in D.C. for a long time. He hasn't personally profited off of that. I don't think anyone would say that. But this is weird with Hunter. There's another story out by Peter Schweitzer, who was the Clinton cash guy, with some strange things going on in China here.
I did an editorial on it a few days ago.
But there's also a bigger political game here, as evidenced by Rudy Giuliani planning a trip to Ukraine to put pressure on them to then go after essentially Hunter Biden. So it's clear what Team Trump is trying to do here. They see Joe Biden as the most likely Democratic nominee, as the biggest threat, and they want to leverage the investigatory powers of the federal government to try to dirty him up as much as possible.
I think there's two pieces here that we have to look at. There's a legitimate piece that needs to be examined that I think we all agree upon. That should go forward no matter what. This is a political issue, no matter what. I mean, you can't do anything in this town without politics. Come on. So I think this is something that truly the Trump folks are going to look at and examine for potential of a use if Joe Biden is the candidate. I don't think there's going to be a full court press based on what my understanding is of the Trump 2020 strategy. But clearly, I think if there's issues with Biden, and I examined and did an editorial on the China issues regarding Biden as well. I think there's issues legitimately have to look at it. Even if Joe didn't benefit, maybe his family did, and that's an issue.
The outrage to me is incredible. I mean, you have Christopher Steele in the 2016 election prancing all over Europe and here in Washington, D.C., pushing Clinton Clinton Oppo information through the State Department across Europe and multiple different intelligence agencies. But Rudy Giuliani, a personal attorney for the president, can't go to Ukraine to look at legitimate opposition research. I mean, Roger, is the outrage is it justified to be so upset that Rudy Giuliani would go to Ukraine for acting on a seemingly legitimate political matter, like you just said?
Well, you can say it's a legitimate matter and still criticize the way someone tries to involve themselves in it. I mean, if Rudy
He even said it was
Giuliani's-
improper. He said it was
I
it
think
improper,
the whole thing,
maybe.
The whole thing was a head fake to just generate clicks, I think, personally. But if Rudy Giuliani sat down 5 years ago and said to himself, how can I hemorrhage as much goodwill as possible? He's basically accomplished that. The idea that he was going to go abroad and solicit the involvement of a government in an investigation that would, I mean, a couple years ago, this would have raised eyebrows, but we're so used to the debasement that these folks have introduced into this. The idea of using our international relationships to penalize specific political foes is not the United States that I'm used to. And I think that's an extremely slippery slope. But again, I think the whole thing, much like everything the Trump administration does, is a hollow political gesture, free of any kind of real intent or agenda or plan or strategy, mainly designed to dominate yesterday, today, and tomorrow, which are the three things that matters in their world.
Well, so we also have
here.
Julian Assange. Sweden is reopening the rape case against him. Now, it's interesting because much of this seems to be a ploy in order to get him extradited back to the United States. Do you think that the Trump administration is taking the correct action on that, Tony?
Look, I think there's some legitimate issues that need to be examined by Sweden regarding the events. I've read the accounts of what happened with those women he was with. Need to be looked at. Two women.
Right.
And their accounts are very frightening. This guy may have well conducted a form of rape. So I think that's the first thing that needs to be looked at for any number of reasons. Beyond that, the issue that I'm concerned about, and I've met Julian Assange at MSNBC one time, and the issue has to be, well, he's very arrogant, and this is the issue. Is the issue not the arrogance, but the issue? That's a separate issue. No, the issue is, did he not only take information that was classified, which has happened in the Pentagon Papers, reporters receive them all the time, but did he actually task Bradley Manning to do something? That's where you cross the line into espionage. And that's that thing that has to be looked at by the Trump administration very seriously.
Yeah. What do you think here, Roger? I mean, just to give a little bit of backstory, so he was charged previously on the rape charges. That is the reason why he sought refuge at the Ecuadorian embassy. While he was there, those charges were dropped. Once he left, the UK authorities took him into custody over basically skipping out on bail, right? And so he is held there over these rape charges that have since been dropped, and now they're being reopened. So that's where we are with that. The U.S. has its own charges against Assange for essentially they're accusing him of hacking, right? And there's a question
conspiracy amongst other things.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a question over whether they really avoided going after him on anything that would relate to First Amendment and kept it very narrowly to hacking. But I mean, what's your view of Mr. Assange here?
I wish I could come before you and tell you I was an expert on Swedish assault law, but I'm not. But I am from Boston, Massachusetts, and the reason I mention that is to have Assange come to the United States would be like the FBI having Whitey Bulger testify. The last people in the world that want Assange in the United States is the Trump administration. That's not going to go well for them. The candidate Trump mentioned WikiLeaks 145 times in the last 30 days of that campaign. If you go back and you look at those compilations of him praising WikiLeaks and just substitute WikiLeaks for Russian intelligence, which is what we now know it was, that doesn't play well for them. So I don't think you're actually going to see a real effort by the United States to get him back here. You might see them try to extradite him to a third-party kind of location. But there's not going to be an appetite for Julian Assange to go through discovery and things like that in an American courtroom.
I don't know about that. I think Bill Barr and the Justice Department seems to be pretty aggressive on this, but we'll have to see. We also want to get to another story here, which is that Congresswoman Rashida Talib has made some comments about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in which she defended the idea of a one-state solution, a majority Arab state. So what she said there, which is is what getting some criticism is. This is a direct quote. There's a kind of a calming feeling I always tell folks when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust, the fact that it was one of my ancestors, Palestinians, who lost their land and some of them lost their lives. Their livelihood, their human dignity, their existence in many ways had been wiped out. I mean, just all of it was in the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews post the Holocaust, post the tragedy, the horrific persecution of Jews across the world at the time. Confusing comments there, Tony. It just seems to me as if another pattern in which the denial of the state of Israel, which is inherently anti-Semitic, don't you think?
Right, it is.
I disagree with
that. This is why I agree with that point. Look, it is inherently disrespectful and I think completely oblivious to history. Let me just say something that may be completely off the wall, but when Trajan, the Roman emperor, razed Jerusalem, there was no Palestinians there. And I hate to go back to a tragic event where Jews were killed, but that's my point. The Jews have been on that terrain for centuries. And the idea here is that she would now say that, the Palestinians are only giving back this land. It's completely out of touch.
It's contested.
It's out of touch with history. So I think she said it to have the effect we're now debating.
Okay, but let me just say, I think what you said is entirely fair. I fundamentally disagree that arguing about whether it's a two-state or a one-state solution, what the future of Israel looks like, is anti-Semitic. And I think that's part of the problem here, is that it becomes very hard to have any debate on Israel policy without being labeled as anti-Semitic. But that's not what's happening here. People are taking her words out of context and saying that she said she got a calming feeling when she thought about the Holocaust. That is not even remotely what she was saying.
It's inartfully phrased.
It is,
should you use the word calming feeling when you're talking about the Holocaust?
Are we now the word police on the right? I mean, I thought we were supposed to be out of the
President
safe
Trump
space
gets it all the
business
time,
here.
right? I mean, it's.
But that's what's hypocritical.
Roger, I think what we want to get to here.
I want to put up Rashida's tweet, though, because she responded. She says, policing my words, twisting and turning them to ignite vile attacks on me will not work. All of you who are trying to silence me will fail miserably. I will never allow you to take my words out of context to push your racist and hateful agenda. The truth will always win. And that's the thing, Roger, is this feels to me very cynical. They took what was inartfully phrased and are trying to make it into her sort of denying the Holocaust or saying she loves the Holocaust. That is not remotely what she was saying here.
It's clumsily worded, as we've already touched on, but I don't see malice in it. I don't see a punitive political agenda in that. It seems to me that she's reflecting on the fact that, after the Holocaust happened, ancestors of her ancestors played some kind of role in accommodating the Jews who went to the homeland after it was established in 1948. So I wouldn't have phrased it that way. I think overall, public officials should have a very high bar for talking about history at all, unless they really, really are willing to roll up their sleeves and get into it, and it's something they really know. And B, certain words like Holocaust, Hitler, other words like that, I think, you just have to really think through what you're going to say and why and towards what end.
Yeah.
And it just can't be casual. And so I think I think it's fair to say it was clumsy. I kind of get what it was she was trying to say, but I don't find it malicious. I mean, she's not marching around the Robert E. Lee statue in Charlottesville chanting "Jews will not replace us." Sure. Let's be clear.
You mean the very fine people on both sides?
And that's what I mean, though, is we are told so many times from those on the left that we have to look at President Trump's comments not in a vacuum, but in a pattern.
Right.
There is a consistent pattern of behavior from this congresswoman, from associating herself with people who are openly pro-Hamas, with imams, and so many of her colleagues who are just blatantly against the state of Israel.
Well, she used certain key dog whistle words here, which I think got us all to talk about this. And let's be clear: there's a picture out there with one of the founding founders of her nation, of the Palestinians, with Adolf Hitler. So let me be very clear on this. Most Nazis were German. All Germans were not Nazis. All Germans are not bad. But to use that metaphor here, radical Islam, Muslims who have a certain view of of Jews are bad, but not all people who have bad views of Jews are Muslim. I mean, there's Muslims who do not have this idea of ending the state. She keeps putting these little dog whistle words out there with the intention of embedding these things for this very thing. Her true loyalty, I believe, is anti-Semitic, and she keeps telegraphing that through these words she uses.
I mean, that's just going
No,
way
it's a
beyond
pattern.
what
If you're
she
going to do it to
says
Trump,
here. That
you're going to
goes
do it
way
to Trump, you can do it
beyond
with
what
her.
she has
So
ever
is it your contention
said.
that there's intent in that
There's intent.
passage?
There's intent
She
because of the
meant to-
words she picked. She picked certain words that would have an effect. This is something that intelligence officers generally look for: is word patterns. And you made it the point. The media uses this very canard on Trump all the time. Well, you have to take this in a larger context. She has a pattern
but hold
of
on.
use
But
of words.
But here's what you're doing. I mean, first of all, I think to say her true allegiance is anti-Semitism is just completely inappropriate and goes way beyond anything that we have had from Congresswoman Tlaib. Second of all, when Trump's words are taken at face value, the right says, oh, it was taken out of oh, let me tell you why
What
it's
is the
not what he really
standard?
meant to
You tell me,
say.
what is the standard?
And then when she says something inartful, suddenly you
I
tag
don't
her
think
as
it's inartful.
completely anti-Semitic. She
Why
is
would
a
you use those
freshman
words?
congresswoman also. She is not the
And so she's
president
not
of the United
responsible-
States.
she's not responsible
so
for her
she
words
has
then.
way
She
less
has
power.
no
5 members of
responsibility for what
Congress.
she says.
To
I'm not
put her on
saying
the
that.
same level as the president, I don't think is.
What is the level?
It's
Well, we're
crazy.
not
Tell me, what is the
necessarily
level?
saying it's on the
Crazy.
same level. And I'm to be clear, I don't know if she's anti-Semitic. I think she is probably against the state of Israel, and just to deny the existence of the state of Israel.
Exactly.
I think there is an inherent anti-Semitism there.
Absolutely.
Well, it's different. She's not denying the existence of the state of Israel.
call
she
for its
does
abolishment.
believe
That's
it,
what
no,
I-
no, no.
yes.
She
Yeah.
believes that there should be a one-state solution. Which would be majority Arab, and that is the problem, is the character that it would be a majority Arab state and not a majority Jewish state, and I get that. But saying that and wanting human rights for your people and your ancestors, that doesn't make you anti-Semitic.
Yes, absolutely. And this goes to the bigger problem of this debate. We can debate the West Bank and we can debate the Gaza. Just because you disagree on those particular points doesn't make you an anti-Semite. But going wholly against for a one-state solution for the destruction of the state of Israel, that is a wholly indifferent policy step. And that is what
and
we're
your
talking about
contention
here.
is that
Precisely.
that's what that statement
Well,
says.
that was about her. That was about her advocacy for a one-state solution. To be clear, that was the context in which these.
That was the context
That was the
of these
context in which.
comments.
But I think we're out of time. So.
Thank God Jared Kushner's on the case. So we can all
Yeah,
sleep-
we can all
we
sleep well
easy at
tonight.
night.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Always
Have a
good to
great
be.
day.
Coming up, actress and activist Alyssa Milano is calling for a pretty unique strike. Guns N' Roses' Axl Rose and crew are taking a Colorado brewery to court. There's a lot of giggles going on over
And,
here right now. I just want you to know
scientists-
that.
The Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, scientists are illuminating knowledge about how ancient galaxies once lit up the universe. All of that when Rising continues.